So time then for the press preview. It's our first look at what is on the front of tomorrow's front pages. It's time to see what's making the headlines with Daily Mirror columnist Susie Boniface, who's joined by the columnist at the article, Ali Miraj, and they'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's check out some of those front pages for you, starting with the Daily Telegraph. Giving in to strikers will lead to more walkouts and higher inflation. That's the view of the Treasury in the Telegraph. The FT Weekend reports that global stocks have suffered one of their worst weeks since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. Onto the Daily Mirror, which says that Sir Paul McCartney has axed the Beatles song back in the USSR from his live shows as a protest against the war in Ukraine. The Guardian leads with schools, pools and libraries facing massive cuts because of local authority funding shortages. Here's your Times saying that bosses are being warned against giving employees big wage increases. The Daily Express reports airport workers have been told to work longer hours to save the nation's summer. And the Eye leads with a poll showing people want Boris Johnson to do more to fix the economy. And don't forget, by scanning the QR code you can see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us discussing them. And as I say, I'm joined tonight by Susie Boniface and Ali Miraj. How are you both? Are you sweltering or are you keeping cool, Susie?
Yeah, I've got my own little wind machine here. I feel like Beyonce. It's amazing.
What about you, Ali? Have you got a little fan in there?
I'm afraid I don't, but let's see how I feel in the next hour and a half.
All right, we'll see if you've got a hanky to mop your brow. I'll tell you what, Ali, why don't you kick things off for us, looking at this story on the front of the Times. Big wage increases are simply too risky, bosses are being told, as we try and sort out this inflation running away from us.
That's right. This is Simon Clarke being reported in the Times, the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, really calling for wage restraint, worrying that we're going to get into this wage price inflationary spiral. This is something that the Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, talked about a couple of months ago and was ridiculed roundly for being insensitive and out of touch, for suggesting exactly this. The problem we've got, Jonathan, is that as was revealed by the Monetary Policy Committee just yesterday when it raised rates to 0.75, by another 0.25%. Rates are going up. They're 1.25% now. The Fed tightened even further than the Bank of England did by 0.75. And we need to get a grip on inflation. I mean, we're going to see interest rates going up. Now, unfortunately, this comes at a time when people are suffering around the country with energy prices rising, cost of living issues. But we need to understand that there is not a crisis for 27 million households in this country. There is a crisis for 5 to 10 million households, and those should be helped. And indeed, the Chancellor did help them by this extra 21 billion that was announced in the last a couple of weeks. That's absolutely right. I personally wouldn't have given the £400 additional grant to everyone in the country because I don't think it was needed. The rest of us are going to have to cut our coat according to our cloth. We're going to have to take some pain because we've got a 400 billion overhang from COVID. And in a rising interest rate environment, the Chancellor does not want to have additional debt servicing on 2 trillion of public debt. So that's where we are.
Susie?
Yes, we do have this situation where we have massive price rises, partly due to COVID, partly due to Brexit, partly due to Ukraine. And if we all got paid more money to cater for that, then prices don't come down again. And the prices actually keep going up because people are prepared to pay them. The only way you bring prices down is if people are not able to make those, they're not able to pay it. And then eventually things sort of bottom out a bit. But to get to that point, people have to go through pain, as Ali said. And that means people who are middle class and doing okay are going to do significantly worse. And it means people who are at the bottom and really struggling are going to really hit the bottom. And some people aren't going to be able to get through it in one piece. And so the problem is here, we have the public urge for more money in our pockets, please, because things are tight, it's difficult. Combined with the fact that the government, who is looking a bit longer term, is saying, well, look, you actually have to have a crunch here. You have to have a correction. and this is a problem. But combined with all that, it's not just the fact that one or two people are asking for a bit more money, or as they're saying here in the article, that that some union discussions, I think it was in the Telegraph they were writing about, some union discussions are actually going to give rises of up to 20% for some people, because there are so many who have been on low wages for such a long time, or in the gig economy, that actually wages coming up is the correction as well. And so we've got this kind of post-pandemic economic contraction, crunch, change going on. It happened after the Black Death as well. It happened after Spanish flu. Economies do have this terrible situation after you have a big health problem like the pandemic. And so we are going to have to go through this process. And the trouble is, when you do that, you really need people running the country, running the economy, who know exactly what they're doing. It doesn't help when they are earning six figures and are telling us to pull our belts, tighten our belts and pull our necks in a bit. That's not good look, whether it's the Bank of England or people who work for the government. But you need to have people you can trust and rely on to get you through this, and to think that they know the bigger picture, and therefore whatever we're suffering, there's a point to it. And I think the viewers just need to question whether they feel that's the government they've got.
OK, which leads us on to the front page of The Eye, Ali. The public tell Johnson, act now to help the UK economy. There's a poll that's been done which suggests 2/3 of voters say the government isn't doing enough to tackle the cost of living crisis. It says a large majority of the public wants more decisive action on the economy.
Look, the public have got to get real. I mean, I'm a member of the public too. We're all suffering over this. I mean, it's going to be pain all round to varying degrees. The poorest in society need to be helped the most. That is where we need to channel our support, and they should be helped, and they already have been helped. And I'm sure that when the price cap, Ofgem looks at the price cap on energy costs in October, some more help may be forthcoming. But honestly, we have to get real. People talk about crises. That word is inflated. There's a crisis going on in Ukraine, in Severodonetsk, when people are having their heads blown off and their homes razed to the ground. There's a crisis going on in Sri Lanka where people can't get food and they're queuing up for hours.
But this isn't an economic crisis, Ali, though, isn't it? This is an economic crisis. Inflation not been this bad since the 70s. It is.
I agree, but it's not for everyone. And by the way, Jonathan, when everyone's having a heart attack about 1.25% interest rates in the late 90s were 7.5%. They were 5.7%. In 2007. Let's put this in context. Yes, it's tough for people out there. They should be helped, the bottom end, who are really struggling. The rest of us are going to have to cut our discretionary spending. How are we? I think people have forgotten that we've just spent the best part of 400 billion on COVID. I mean, paying people's wages for 2 years, in some cases on furlough, was going to have a massive economic impact. Where do we think this money comes from? The government only raises money by taxing you or by borrowing. There is a third way, and it's called printing money, quantitative easing, which leads to inflation. That's why we've got this problem to a degree. So that, I'm sorry, there is no easy answer. And I think the government is now being honest finally with people. Michael Gove said it. Rishi Sunak's having restraint is not going to go for tax cuts now. We've just got to accept that this is going to be a really difficult period.
Susie, give me your reaction to that, and then I'm going to ask you quickly about the story on the front of The Guardian.
The fact that the government, I think talking about tax cuts and conflating with the inflationary issues we've got, are two completely different things. The inflation we've got and how we deal with that, there's global problems that are going on. It is affecting some other countries far differently to us. We're having the luxury of being able to talk about it like this. But tax cuts or austerity measures are not related. So if anybody comes along and says we need to cut services to repay this, it's tripe. The money that was spent on COVID and the money that may be spent on any of these issues is money that literally the government can tell the Bank of England, we want some money. And then the government can later tell the Bank of England, you need to forget that we owe you that money. The money it's gone. We don't owe you anything more. You just literally, the government and the Bank of England rewrite their current account to fit. So it's not a case that we borrow from ourselves in order to, and we have to pay it back to ourselves. That's just not the case.
OK, and just 30 seconds, Susie, on the front of The Guardian then, on that theme. The Guardian has suggested there's a 1.7 billion hole in budgets for things like schools, swimming pools, libraries as well.
Yeah, so this is the real cost of when you have inflation problems. Everyone who has budgeted, whether it's a household budget or a local authority for their spending for the upcoming year, they suddenly find that the cost of the things they have to do have gone through the roof. And so that's where real cuts do start coming in. And it's your local government, which affects far more of your daily life than the national government we like to talk about. That's your social care, that's your dustbins, that's your schools. That's where the cuts are really going to bite. And that's starting already.
OK, Ali, we'll get your thoughts on that after 11 o'clock. We're going to have to go to a break. Coming up in a couple of minutes, this story, it's on the front of the Express, saying that airport workers have been told to work longer hours to save the nation's summer. Don't go away. Part two of the press preview. Susie and Ali still with me. Ali, tell us about this story on the front of the Daily Telegraph. The Home Secretary has given a wide-ranging interview, hasn't she, to the paper, including calling the European Convention on Human Rights scandalous over its decision to ground that first Rwandan deportation flight.
Well, look, the policy was on the back of trying to deal with an issue that is pervasive. We've had 30,000 people cross the channel illegally last year, 10,000 so far this year. The government has to be seen to be getting a grip of this and controlling the borders. And painstakingly, everything it's tried so far, including dealing with the French on extensive negotiations and discussions, including 50 million quid that was given to them, has failed. So something had to be done. Now, 130 people were meant to go on this flight. It ended up with 7 meant to be going. And then in the end, it was challenged by European judges under the Convention on Human Rights. Rule 39, the right to a family life, and the others cited the same case, and the thing didn't take off, and £300,000 this flight was going to cost, potentially wasted. The thing is, Patel is saying she wants us to pull out of the European Convention on Human Rights, replace it with a Bill of Rights, to take control of who we decide is going to stay in this country and not allow people smugglers who unscrupulously allow people to come along and pay them £7,000 a pop and put their lives at risk to abuse an asylum system. And I think it's absolutely fair that certain action is taken here.
Something had to be done, Susie, says Ali.
About up to 85% of the people who come across using people traffickers in that way across the channel are genuine asylum seekers. So something didn't have to be done. What needed to be done was to stop the people traffickers having that access to people and being able to exploit them. And the best way of doing that is either to set up proper authorised reception centres. Elsewhere, there are many, many countries in the world where there is not possible to have a legal route to get into the UK. There are no ways to get a visa in places like, for example, Eritrea. So it needs to be sorted out. A lot of those who are appearing in the camps in Calais now are from Afghanistan. There was a report earlier on of someone who was trying to get to the UK because this is where his wife is. Now, under normal asylum rules, you have an absolute right to join a spouse if they're in another country and they've been given asylum. But for some reason, that chap has been either denied entry or but not had his application processed properly, or he's not even been able to apply. I don't know quite the background there, but if he's got a spouse in this country, he's a slam dunk for a genuine asylum claim. As seeing as he's come from Afghanistan, he's probably our responsibility anyway, morally. But he's stuck there in a camp in Calais paying people traffickers because of the way we have had this hostile environment for our asylum system. If we just made it a sane environment, then perhaps we'd be able to assess people properly and do it in a better, more authorised way.
OK, we'll talk more about that. I know you want to come back, Ali, but we're out of time. We'll talk more about it after 11 o'clock. Just tell me very quickly about this story on the front of the Telegraph. Kate Bush. You're a Kate Bush fan, Ali? She's had a #1 single with a song that's 37 years old.
Well, she is the first UK female solo artist who had a #1 top of the album chart. She's an iconic figure, very haunting songs. I mean, look, personally, I prefer the dance remix of Cloud Busting that came out not so long ago, which I drop into my DJ sets rather than Running Up That Hill. But it's, it's a classic. It's an iconic track. And I think it's very good that younger people are introduced to this music and can connect with it. I think it's very good. I think the only issue here is protecting new talent and new artists as well. And that's why I think the way these streams are counted makes a lot of sense to me. But I think it's great that we're connecting, the younger people are connecting with Kate Bush.
Susie, very briefly.
never managed to get on with Stranger Things, but all I can remember of Kate Bush is that that song was also used for a fantastic TV programme in 1986 called Running Scared, which people of my age might remember. And we all cared about Kate Bush in 1986. And of course, that was a bit more recent and more nearer the time that she actually did release the track. But in those days, of course, she wasn't able to access millions and millions and millions and millions of people to push it to the top of an album chart. Those days, I think top of the album chart, you get a few 100,000 and you were number one.
Yeah.
Now it's down to streaming and it's so many more.
I reckon if you brought that little fan a bit closer to your face, Susie, you could probably do quite a good impression of Kate Bush in one of her videos. Thank you both very much indeed. That's perfect. Look at that. Perfect.